it refers to individuals who are armed with a bill or billhook. I'm going to show an image now to help describe this and to help convey this. On the left, I have something called a bill. Now, a bill is a class of agricultural implement used for trimming tree limbs, which was often repurposed as an infantry polearm. So I want you to imagine just like it's like a kind of like a hook on the end of a handle. Now these could also be long. So imagine like a spear, kind of your two-handed thing with just a hook on the end. So then what would happen is, interestingly, then I guess that when the people were called to arms and stuff, they could repurpose this agricultural item as a weapon. So it would turn into basically like a spear, right? So this is where we move into the second image here. So for listeners, just imagine a spear, but the front there's like a separate convergent little bit that sticks out, and it's a hook, and on the very back is a spike. So you could hit in either direction. You can hit thrust forwards, you can sweep like hack forwards, or move backwards with even, or something like that. Or I suppose you could spin it in your hands and use the spiky side if you want. So this in game reduces the armor of enemy opponents, and this kind of it does make sense because it is an armor-piercing weapon essentially, and it was really popular in England alongside the longbow. It's actually fascinating because even when Europeans generally they were moving away from their equivalent, which is the halberd, which is the final image, which I'll discuss in just a sec. The English were still using longbows and billhook like for ages. Even when the Europeans started bringing out arquebuses. Sorry for the sirens in the background.
Yeah, it's atmospheric in the background.
As long as it's not drowning
the sounds
me out.
of the city.
yeah, it's so hot. It's so hot in England today. It's like 5 million degrees. But basically, when the rest of Europe was moving to arquebuses, like basically early proto muskets, the English were still using longbow, and they had longbow on the front and they had billmen on the front. So longbows at the back, billmen on the front. So billman is just a guy holding a bill hook, which is the item that I described, a sort of modified bill. And in the final image, I do have a halberd here. And this is more like it's a little bit like an axe with a spike on the top. Halberd is a much more known weapon because it was used widely across Europe. And fascinatingly, they have exactly the same purpose. They're an armor-piercing weapon, and it's convergent evolution, which means that they were designed around the same time period to deal with the same problem, i.e. heavier, more better armor, making spears a little less useful. But just in different ways, different inventors inventing a different thing. So the billhook was very English, and the halberd, I didn't look into it to tell you where it was invented, but it definitely spread across Europe, and that was their way of dealing with armor.
Well, the longbow and the kind of changing to kind of gunpowder technology, part of the reason was the fact that we had our longbows could pierce armor. Like, it's actually one of the things where people believe they didn't, but that was part of the reason of our successes at battles like Agincourt. They were that powerful that the shots could go through the French armor.
That's interesting. I don't know that. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, you know the old saying, right? If it works, there's not, leave it. Don't fix it, right?
It's a lot cheaper to get people to be, first of all, training longbows. Like, have the whole population training in gunpowder technology. That's the point where you need to have more. That's an organized military. Whereas if you have more kind of peasant military, having people train with bows, as any man can have a bow and can train with it, but not every man can have a firearm.
Right, there, very good point. And I'll also throw in a little rogue thing about weapons generally. And I wanted to touch on throwing knives again, which is what I talked about in the first episode. But it's very brief. I was about to call you monkey nuts again, but we're grown-ups now. Rob, in the first episode, you asked me, what about throwing axes? Well, I've gone away and looked it up. And I can confirm that throwing axes are also stupid and not used in real life.
Oh, I actually found out the opposite.
Oh, because
I did my own research.
Let me finish. In this time period, they were obsolete by the time period of the Lancastrians. So, a reminder, it's about roughly 1200 to 1500, basically. It's not quite, but almost. So, in that time period, they were long extinct weaponry. But if you go further back, don't quote me on this, but I'm thinking like Iron Age sort of vibes. Yeah, they were used there. But
okay, so I'm actually going to tell you you're wrong.
Okay, go on.
It's actually the Germans were the ones who would continue to use it. So there's a few things. So firstly, they were used mostly as as a charging unit. So what they would use is either the shield break, so they would be tossed to shield break, or even the fact that the end didn't stick in, it just bounces around and maybe still do some damage within it. And actually, you know the reason why you have in World War One and World War Two, you have the German grenades which are on a stick with an end, and you have the Americans which are just a general ball.
Dude, I was just thinking about this the other day, but you go.
The Americans was designed in a way because of baseball. Every boy knows how to throw a baseball, whereas the Germans were designed around throwing axes, and every man knows how to throw an axe.
Dude, that's so interesting. Thank you for answering that question. I had a hairbrush in my hand the other day, right? And hear me out. It's got like a handle, and I may or may not have been brushing my own hair. I may have a hairbrush, whatever, And I'm brushing my hair with this thing, and I was like, this is so much easier than like a comb or something, Like it's just I could just hold it. It's so comfortable in my hand. I feel like I can do whatever with it. And it just made me think, as like my teenage boy inside me came out. I got thinking about those stick grenades, like the grenades at the end of the stick. And I was like, why does everyone have those, classic US military like frag grenades, like those spherical ones? I was like, that's way harder to throw than this stick thing. And then I was planning to I was thinking, I'm gonna go look this up because I wonder how that became obsolete. But I guess it's not about whether it became
the obsolete part of it now is I also looked that up as well.
Okay.
So the reason they're also obsolete now is because if you think about it, how much gear you have to carry around. So if you have your grenade, you have the armament part at the end, and having this whole bit at the bottom is just dead weight which you're carrying around with you, and dead kind of space to carry around stuff. So it was literally just made obsolete by the fact of space to hold it. That was it.
That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
We're covering all sorts. I was not expecting to have literally. I was genuinely thinking this question like 3 days ago. But yeah, that's all right. So that's my segment now. I'm going to hand over to you to finally, after 3 episodes, talk about the one I've been waiting for: Burgandian imports. Why is this a thing in the game? Or what does it mean? What's the inspiration behind it?
So you've been waiting to hear this talk about the Kingdom of Burgundy. So the Kingdom of Burgundy, they were allies of the English between 1419 and 1435, and they were also engaged in trade. As you know, that's what allies do. So the Kingdom of Burgundy, they were pioneers of gunpowder weapons in Europe specifically, because obviously gunpowder weapons actually mostly originate from China, they believe. But they were more so interested in the cannons, bombards, culverins, that side of like big artillery style weapons. However, in the game, it's actually talks more about the relevance is hand cannons.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to talk about the Kingdom of Burgundy at all.
What?
I'm actually going to talk about who used hand cannons in Europe. Let's talk about that instead. And my favorite game right now, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. So let's talk about this instead.
Okay,
this is interesting.
This is such a disappointment. It's such a C block. I thought you were going to talk. Okay.
So hand cannons were. This is actually, to be honest, doing an episode on this group would be super interesting. So long as in Europe with a group called the Hussite, and I might be butchering that name, the Hussite, and the Hussist followers. Basically, these are a Czech order they refused the Pope. They refused to acknowledge the Pope as the head of all Christians.
We could do an episode on that because I think they're in Age of Empires too.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
So they basically said their leader can only be Jesus Christ, and they did not agree that with wealth owned by the church representatives. So they protested other things such as trade with indulgence, and they were led by people who do know the game. So bring us up on screen now, if you can.
Yeah, we'll do.
By a man named Jan Žižka, and I only know this because of the game. Otherwise, I'd have seen that pronunciation. I've gone, I'm never getting that. As long as the game's got it right.
When you say the game, you're talking Kingdom Come Deliverance, yeah?
Kingdom Come Deliverance.
Yeah, okay.
Kingdom Come Deliverance. He is a great game if you've never played it. If not, though, it's we'll talk more about the history of the real person. So Jan Žižka is one of only 6 commanders in history who've never lost a battle. Which is
hold on though. How many times did he fight? It's not like I fought one time and never lost a battle.
Quite a lot. Apparently, he's still this is. So he's the guy on the guy in the right, that statue. If you look at guy, basically he's otherwise called Jan the One-Eyed is one of his other nicknames.
Yeah, he's got a bandage around his eye.
Exactly. He lost it in. I can't remember when. I'm not going to try and tell you when he lost his eye. But these guys basically they were massive on their hand cannons. So much so that they use these kind of wagons to transport and then also protect the soldiers in battle. So if you look at this image on the left, what they use is these wagons they transported with. They had at the top of it, the top of the wagon. They basically moved down to the side of it, had openings in it so they could shoot out of, and it protected them from all kind of arrow fire, gunfire.
That looks pretty cool.
Awesome. It is awesome. And they yeah. So I was like, well, basically, I'm looking at hand cannons. Burgundy has nothing to do with this. Let's look at something that I want to look at instead.
Yeah. So it's for listeners, this painting or this drawing is like it's kind of like a mobile cart, like a box.
Yes.
And there's like a door in the back where people can walk into it, but the front, which is facing the enemy, is a big, really tall plank with holes in, as Rob was just saying, so that people can fit their weapons. Like they're just big enough holes that the weapons can fit through. And I guess they're just sort of firing, so they're fully protected from like arrows coming in their direction, unless it's like a super crazy lucky arrow to like fit through that gap.
Get through that little gap, because you always see it in films and TV. When they're shooting out castles, and then that one arrow shooting the guy into the castle, that tiny little slit that gets through to them.
Yeah, never.
I'm sure it happened every so often, but it was probably way less likely.
No way, dude. Once in a lifetime, I reckon. Once in a lifetime.
But you can see, so they basically, you can also see they had these in the bottom right. They also had these like shields as well that they almost used, that they had the hand cannons on, because a lot of these hand cannons, as much as they're called hand cannons, they're big. They're not small weapons. Hand cannons are. Mm-hmm. They're quite large, and they sometimes took 2 men to fire.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some of them did, some of them didn't. So they could kind of like, if you needed to fire it without something to stand it upon, it's quite difficult to do without someone else with you.
So it's like a long stick with a cannon on the end, like a small cannon on the very front, and then I guess there must be like a fuse at the front where they light it. And then it just goes, and they hold the stick in their hands to aim it. I'm sort of.
I believe the fuse is at the back end of the front metal portion.
Okay.
I believe that's where it is. But I may be wrong about that.
It's crazy when you look back through history and you're like, man, there are so many different kinds of weapons and innovations, and everything makes sense, but given the amount of warfare during that time period. But yeah. That's crazy.
So now you know a little bit more about the Kingdom of Burgundy.
I do know anything more about the Kingdom of Burgundy. That's so annoying. Okay,
they were allied with the English between 1419 and 1435. There you go. You've learned something.
So for people, I'll have to take this one from my basic understanding. Okay, the Kingdom of Burgundy is a place in between, basically France and Germany, like modern day. And it's like a few territories, but it also comprises of modern-day Netherlands, but also a little further down towards Italy. Like it's like little clusters, I think. And yeah, in the game there's a technology called Burgandian imports, which allows the English to use hand cannons earlier. But this, as we know, is unhistorical because they had no. Are you saying they had no connection to hand cannons?
They had very limited connection to hand cannons, and the time that they did get hand cannons was the late 15th century when we were no longer allied with them.
Okay,
we English were no longer. I'm not actually. I'm not saying we as in terms of we are the English.
This is our bias coming out. No, gotta get it out. So
when the English were actually allied to them, they wouldn't have really had access. They may have had very, very limited, but it was more related to the trade of. So we would have traded a lot of like actually wool down their way. So they were, because obviously they had part of, I believe, on the edge of Flanders and that sort of thing, where some of their historical kind of. Wool centers were in terms of for producing the clothing out of wool. So we did a lot of wool trade with them. They gave us some weaponry such as cannons, bombards, culverins, but not really hand cannons.
I see. All right. I think we can move on to the collar of Esses. So again, another thing in the game which you can research, and it improves the damage of knights and demi-lancers. And so, does that make sense? Well, I'll let you be the judge because I couldn't really. I'm not sure. So the collar of Esses is a livery collar. So firstly, what's livery? So livery is like an identifying design, like a uniform or symbol that marks your affiliation. So it's like a uniform, basically. Like have you ever seen? I think this is the correct thing to say. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rob. But the Beefeaters, the famous Royal Guard of the UK, right? Like they protect the king, and everyone wants to take a picture next to them. They've got the big black hats, the really tall hats, and they never move, and they hold their gun. So that red uniform and stuff, that's like colored, that's covered in livery, right? It's got like nice design and stuff like that. It's basically clothes for non-practical reasons. It's for identifying reasons. So this person is, you know who they belong to, as in I say belong. You know who they're loyal to, essentially. Is that fair way to describe that? You'd say?
Yes, I think so. So it's basically, I think the proper definition is it has to be worn by a servant of an official. Like, it's not servant in the way that people think of. It's more someone who serves an official.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
as
an
in
official
your job,
capacity,
like,
so
yeah, kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Not the actual that definition of servant,
Yeah,
as in
yeah. Gotcha. So that helps to move me on to the next one. So a livery collar is usually a heavy chain. Like, I'm thinking like pimp chain, you know, like it's like over the top, like overly large because it.
I always think of the who's the one that had the massive clock.
Ali
Massive
G,
clock
Ali
chain.
G, yeah. Is that him?
No. Ali G is not the original. You're gonna get some. You're gonna get some hate.
Oh,
If you say
no,
that.
yeah.
Ali G did not do that. It was originally a rapper. Public Enemy. That's it. Public Enemy.
All right, thank you for that very important correction in this House of Lancaster video. So
we obviously got to get our modern references if we can, you know, it helps people understand. You know, people know Flavor Flav in his big clock, so they'll know this.
Yeah,
they'll understand what this means.
So this episode is definitely overrunning. So this livery collar is like a heavy chain, right? Imagine it's usually made of gold. And it's worn as insignia of office or fealty, and it's used throughout all of Europe during the Middle Ages. It's like it's not like a necklace that goes around the neck. This goes all the way over the shoulders. You know, it goes over the shoulders, comes all the way down to the center of the chest. Is the word I'm looking for ornate? Is that a good word? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's flashy, you know, and it's meant to be flashy. See, the collar of Esses is one of the oldest and best known in the world. It's been in continuous use in England since the 14th century, including today. Wow. It's still used today, but it's ceremonial now, right? Like now it's like less, you know. Now they
so much of that old stuff is all ceremonial.
Yeah. But it's cool to see.
What's it used by? Who uses it now?
That's such a good question that I should have looked up. Such a good question.
Perhaps someone else could tell us in the comments. Tell us in the comments what is used for today, because I'm interested to know.
I've stuck to the scope of the video, which is about
yeah, me too. I've really stuck to the scope of the video.
So the connection to the House of Lancaster is that the collar of Esses was given by John of Gaunt. So if you remember, he was the guy who married Blanche and came into the Lancastrian line, and his son was Henry IV, the first king. So John of Gaunt, pretty important guy. And it remained in use by the House of Lancaster throughout all of Wars of the Roses. It shows loyalty to a lord. So just generally, livery collars are for showing loyalty to a lord. So I suppose in terms of the game and the fact that it improves the damage of your knights, maybe it's because the knights, you know, they're all dressed up in livery. Maybe they have collars. Livery collars as well, you know, like, oh, we're loyal to the House of Lancaster. It wouldn't have been the collar of Esses, of course, because there's only one of those. But yeah, is that historical? Is it accurate? I don't know. Maybe it doesn't even matter. Who cares? We're just here for the laughs. Let's move on and to you, Monkey Nut Sword, Rob.
All right, Seb. I've got an interesting one.
Go on.
It's the Warwolf or Warwolf Trebuchet. I feel like they should have shouted "wow" when they fired this thing, because it's an impressive piece of kit. Let's put it.
You put an image on the screen of a giant trebuchet. That thing is huge.
Yeah, these are lots of basically renditions of where they think it was used. So basically, the Siege of Stirling. So that's Stirling is in Scotland. For anyone who doesn't know, the Siege of Stirling in 1304. It was used by the English against the Scottish. So it's believed to be the biggest trebuchet ever built. So I found estimates of what people think in the terms of the size it was. And so let me start off by saying a normal trebuchet was about 15 meters or 50 foot. So 15 meters or 50 feet. They believed that this thing was either 90 to 120 meters or 300 to 400 feet tall, which I don't know whether there's embellishment. I don't know whether it's, but if that was built that large, that is kind of crazy.
Dude. That's like, I know we keep referencing Warhammer, but that is very Warhammer-like, isn't it? Like a fictional sort of thing.
And so basically, you can see the images. You can see a trebuchet that looks like it could well be. So by the height is basically if the swinging arm is at its tallest, that's where it would have been 300 feet or 90 meters or whatever they think it was. So they're using the tallest height of when the arm was at its top end. So
I have a question. Are you saying that the Warwolf Trebuchet, or Werewolf Trebuchet, whatever, This is only one trebuchet. This is the name of a
One
singular
trebuchet.
trebuchet.
It's the name of this trebuchet because because it was so grand and so mighty. So I got a bit more about it in the battle. So basically, that castle was being held by about 25 men, which again, when people talk about castles, you think about these armies of thousands of men could be attacking a castle. You can hold a castle with small numbers of men for a long period of time because
Such a defensive position.
it's very hard. Yeah, exactly. It's such a defensive position. So they had 13 catapults and trebuchets bombarding the castle for 3 months before the point of the Warwolf was erected. So they they erected this Warwolf Trebuchet and had a master craftsman build it along with a team of guys. And after the Scottish garrison saw the completed trebuchet, they wanted to surrender.
That's hilarious. So, hold on, this is such a medieval solution. Like, medieval problems, medieval solutions, right? So it's just like, it's like, okay, why can't we break through this wall? I don't know, make it bigger. Make it just go bigger. So,
it gets even better, by the way. It gets even better.
Okay, this is the best bit. This is my favorite bit of the episode. I've already decided. All right, go
on. So after they tried to surrender, the king basically went, nah. He instead erected a viewing gallery so that the ladies of the court could sit down and watch it, and they fired it anyway. Because they're like, I built this thing, I'm firing this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you put so much into it, you imagine, and then imagine you never get to fire it, you'll be like, oh, come on, this is so awesome, just one go. Oh, that's amazing. So the connection to the House of Lancaster is that the Lancastrians use this?
No. It was just because it's 1304, so it was
within the time period.
It's within the time period, but it wasn't Lancastrian. It wasn't actually Lancastrian at all. But
do you know
the thing's awesome.
Who is it? Just like
1 second, I got a ruler which has when all the kings were. Okay. It would have been Edward the First.
So he's got a big ruler.
It's basically a ruler with every king, a king and queen of England. Back from the starts at William the Conqueror, William the First, because it's a bit contentious whether he was the first king, but we won't get into that now. But a lot of people say he is the first king, but you could say it's earlier than that. There was people trying to unite England before that point.
Hold on, do you say William the First as in William the Conqueror?
Mm-hmm.
No way, he was the first king. What are you talking about?
I don't agree.
Ethelstan is the first king.
I agree.
What a disgrace to suggest such a thing. Anglo-Saxon England.
I'm just saying
England. No, I'm joking. Yeah. So, okay, good stuff, man. Good stuff. So, I will take over from there and talk a little bit about ships of the crown. So, the House of Lancaster, especially Henry V, actively used and expanded royally commissioned naval forces during the 100 Years' War. So I don't know if you remember, if you watched the previous episode, or maybe the one before, I can't remember, but I talked about how England had a big shipbuilding tradition that's lasted long before and after the House of Lancaster, especially after. It got really big. But part of this was around the fact that the government actively encouraged this industry, and under Henry V, it was massively expanded, right? So in medieval England, especially the 14th, 15th centuries, the monarchy, it didn't maintain a standing navy, right? So it's not like it can call upon its warships that are just docked somewhere. Not in the modern sense, anyway. So instead, when wars broke out, especially in France, right, the king would commandeer merchant vessels, converting them into warships under the authority of the crown. So it's basically like, right, we're at war now, so all you traders, your ships belong to us. We got important things to do with them. All right, so these ships, they often became temporary royal fleets for cross-channel invasions or naval engagements. So the ships of the crown, as referenced in Age of Empires 4, it likely represents that transition from ad hoc private ships to centralized royal control, improving logistics, naval cohesion, and combat strength and stuff like that, which aligns very well with what it does in the game. And Henry V's fleet in 1415 to 1420 was one of the largest centralized fleets England had fielded at the time. So it's and not surprising that was Henry V, given everything we've learned about him over the last few episodes.
He does seem pretty cool, Henry V.
Yeah. All right, you want to talk to us about padded jack?
Padded jacks. So if you bring up the images again, padded jacks are more commonly, I'd say, known as gambesons.
Oh,
So
I
gambesons,
mentioned
I think,
gambesons in a yeah.
yeah.
Go on.
So Gambeson is a name that most people know them as. Some people try to. I've actually looked up this. Some people try to argue between whether a padded jack's different from a Gambeson. It's not. It's just different naming conventions. It really is the same thing.
Okay.
I did a lot of looking up. I may be wrong. I'm just going to preface this, but from everything I've looked up, there's been a lot of contentiousness because I think people just try and claim one's from one country, one name's from another country. It's the same thing.
So explain it then for those of us who missed previous episodes.
So what a gambeson is something you wear underneath armor or as its own armor in itself. But generally, they would be different if it's worn under armor versus if it's worn as armor. Because if you're wearing it as armor, you want it itself to be more of the ricochet. If you're wearing it under armor, you want it to be there to kind of. If you get hit by a hammer, you want the blow to spread. So the gambeson's one that spreads the blow because it's acting as padding and it's acting as kind of spreading of that impact. It's quite loose sleeved in what it looks like. I actually expect it to be more tight sleeved.
Yeah,
but it might well be that it's
very baggy and puffy and stuff, isn't it?
And then I actually looked at the reason why it was loose sleeved is because if you're an archer, you need to have mobility.
Oh yeah,
of course. That would be
so annoying if it was restrictive.
Exactly. So if it's tight, it will then stop you from moving. So they are slightly loose, slightly baggy to help keep that kind of mobility in it. So they were kind of they were commonly used by yeomen and spearmen, which again actually does align in the game. So that's what its effect is. Yeomen and spearmen get extra armor from these, so it does actually quite well align with that fact.
Makes sense.
That and because they wouldn't be wearing if you're a yeoman. So that's the art. By the way, yeoman again is that archer. That's a yeoman archer. And a spearman, you generally wouldn't be having a full plate armor. You'd have more of a lighter armor generally, rather than man at armor would have full plate. If you're having full plate, you're obviously going to be wearing a padded jack or a gambeson underneath it because it's going to dissipate any blows.
Yeah.
Whereas with these guys, they are having the dissipate blow effect as well as that kind of more of an impact prevention. So they would be like just basically really thick with wool, like loads of layers, super thick these things would be. So I can imagine the hot days it would be awful.
Yeah, oh god. Imagine like today, like having to wear one of these and go to war, man.
I always think that if when I heard the fact of the English longbow was powerful enough to go through armor, how is this truly stopping it? How does it do much? I guess it's more of like a ricochet style shot, or a less powerful impact shot, or again, just maybe it just keeps it slightly further out, and if it penetrates slightly less deep,
maybe we're
be enough.
Underestimating the padded jack.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, and good thing you got the archer on the screen, because did you have anything to say about synchronized shot?
Oh, I do indeed. So I think that I find that there's a classic trope from anything medieval films. I mean, I think the really good one is Lord of the Rings, where you like send a volley, that sort of thing. When everyone in unison fires a shot, it all comes down in one burst. That is, to any historians who are watching this, I know already I talk about how much they're seething with rage thinking about the volley shot, because it's so historically inaccurate. Is it actually not? So
okay,
because again, why would you release all your arrows in one go? You just continuously shoot in the speed in which you could shoot at. Why would you stop shooting to do it in unison with everyone else? Why would you stop?
But every single time a movie has portrayed that everyone sort of aiming at the same time and then unleashing at the same time. That's just completely wow,
complete nonsense.
Wow,
complete nonsense.
Someone call Hollywood. This is a disgrace.
But I would actually, again, give the game a little bit of credit. Is that when you actually see when you do the volley in this game, the synchronized shot, it's not all one big volley fire. No. It's more actually realistic to history, which was people just firing. So the starting point potentially you might have had people more closer in unison, but again, everyone has different firing speeds. It's more, and again, your archers may have been spread over a widespread. It's just you get the enemies in range of your shot, and obviously everyone at this point is talented with their weapon enough to know how close they need to be. They're just firing their shots.
Yeah. Oh, sounds good. All right.
Yeah, it's also more accurate if you think about it. If you had all these arrows in one go, they could intercept and they can.
Yeah.
It's more accurate.
Yeah. Interesting.
And also more scary, continuous fire of arrows.
Yeah, because it makes you like, oh, if it was a volley shot, you'd be like,
Yeah.
"We'll hide under the shields.
Shield!
Okay, run forward,
Okay,
quickly bring out the
yeah,
shield
yeah.
again." You know, whereas like, yeah, a constant volley is pretty terrifying. All right, that's it for the in-game topics. Shall we move on to bonuses?
This is Rob from the future, or maybe the past, asking us either 5-star and a like on the podcast wherever you're listening to. Thank you, and back to the podcast.
It's contraception. That's right.
Okay.
I have picked a topic
Okay.
which is going to be difficult to remain PG, and I'm going to do my absolute best. So, how did they prevent pregnancy? Well, there's multiple options. The first one, get ready. This is the official terminology in Latin. Coitus interruptus.
Is that basically pulling?
Yeah, it is. I was about to ask you to guess, but you already knew. So, coitus interruptus. Maybe still people in the modern day try this method.
Yeah. It's a regularly used methodology.
But for listeners who perhaps of a particular age, this is not an effective method. Do not rely on this method. It's just that in the Middle Ages, this was the only one. This is one of the only ones they had. It would
massively improve it. It would massively improve your chances of not doing it.
Yes.
Again, it still has a chance of contraception. It just does reduce your chances.
It is not 100% reliable, which is a running theme in these options. So the second one option is herbal contraceptives.
Okay.
So the technology wasn't there, of course, to be
Middle Ages the pill.
Yeah, the technology wasn't there to be chemically preventing pregnancy like the pill. In fact, I believe the pill was invented in like the 50s or something. So for the majority of human history,
I was expecting it to be the pill.
Yeah, but it's not that. So what would happen is these herbs would be a way of it wasn't like chemically preventative. Instead, it was kind of the opposite in that it was a way of ending pregnancy before it had really materialized, or to bring about menstruation early, basically, right? And so they would mix into teas or directly apply it to the area of the woman. So yeah, you can see why my choice of topic is making this really hard to remain PG, isn't it? So I'll give you a couple examples, although there were a fair few. One of them is called rue. Ruta graviolinus.
How are you spelling that?
R-U-E. Don't know what this is.
That's like road. Is it road in French?
Yeah, I mean, the Latin, the species name is Ruta graviolinus or something like that. But there's another one called Queen Anne's lace. This is for the biologists. This is Dacus carota, which I think is a variation. It's like a wild carrot. Finally, douching, which is douching, as in
Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
So yeah, basically this is washing the area afterwards after activity.
Don't try this one. This definitely won't work.
Well, again, it's limited efficacy here. And there were actually some rarer options that I discovered in this rabbit hole, but they're not really relevant in England, so I'll just super lightly touch on them. It's like they would like soak sponges in things like vinegar or wine and apply it to the area of the woman. But again, there's limited evidence to suggest that this was actually happening in England during the time period. So it was more like a Mediterranean from what I could see, like Italian sources and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, so there you go. You probably never thought that question in your life, and now you know the answer. When in doubt, coitus interruptus. No.
I can imagine that's probably the most effective one in the period.
Yeah, I mean,
in the period, I can imagine compared to
I didn't look into efficacy rates of these herbal contraceptives, but
I think they could be massively varied by the person doing this. That's probably why it's probably not very effective, because you have to have someone who knew how to do it.
Yeah.
I think there's that classic trope of a herb woman.
Who
I think that was the origin of part of the witch stuff, is because it's the
mixing
person who lived out in the
herbs
woods, collecting herbs, making concoctions, and that was like, that person's a witch.
Yeah. I mean, I think, to be honest, the most effective method that they had at the time was maybe all three. You could do all three. There's nothing stopping you from doing more than one.
my bonus topic. So I kind of hinted it in our last episode, which is it's the question of what if Henry VI wasn't mad. I know that this is a lot of people are kind of. I think a lot of people will be interested in themselves and probably have themselves thought about it, because Henry VI was heir to the throne of France and England. He had two issues. Firstly, he was a bit of a nutcase. Secondly, when his dad died and he became king, he was only 1 year old. So there was a lot of time in between for people to go, he's not a legitimate king.
Very,
and so
sorry to cut your flow.
Yeah.
Very briefly, just nutcase non-English viewers not gonna follow
sorry.
that.
That's a very English term, isn't it? Yeah.
So maybe just explain Henry VI super briefly again, like he did in the first episode.
Henry VI had a form of schizophrenia, which meant that he had a lot of mental illness throughout his lifetime. A lot of them it actually led to immobility, so he was unable to move. If he was his father's son and he had been a really powerful ruler, would there have been a unity? Would he have been the king who could have united England and France? Because it would have led to England would have been in a strong position because he would have still had that strong ruler, and it may not have led to the Wars of the Roses because a lot of that was due to him being an ineffective king. That may not have happened. We could have had unity with France. That is a lot more contested. A lot of people would say that there still would have been unlikely to have secured it. It may well have been that we have been unity between the west of France and England, and it actually would have changed the whole progression of Europe in its entirety. That may have been that there may have been a French division, and that the half of France would have still stayed English. England would have still maybe spoken French, and the English language may not have flourished in the same way it did.
The main event, the tier list placement. So here we go. Our first placement onto the where would you rather live leaderboard or tier list. If you were to be picked up and casted back through time and space to appear in one of these places, so today we're talking about House of Lancaster, or the Lancastrian era of England, it's a total dice roll of who you'd be. Would you be king? Would you be a slave? Or anything in between? It's just a complete, proportional dice roll kind of thing of what you'd end up being. So, where would you rather live? That's the game. And right now we don't have anything to compare it to, but as the podcast progresses, we're going to have debates around whether one is more or less than the other.
And we might have to move it based on what we learn from other ones. We might be thinking this is awful, but then we find out it's actually one of the best options.
Yeah, we might do some moving. Can you zoom in, like just Control Plus or Control up the scroll wheel a little bit, just for people who are viewing to be able to get a proper look? For people who aren't, no problem. Let me explain to you the tiers that we have. At the very top, we've got pretty great. I don't know if anything from this ever going to go in there, but it could, right? Pretty great. Like I'd be okay with going back to that time, basically. Then,
nothing's to be better than today.
No, of course not. Despite what some people might say, but it's never going to be better today. So then you got surprisingly okay. It's like, look, this ain't good, but like, yeah, it's actually, now that we've been learning about it and stuff, I would have thought it'd be bad, but actually, it's okay. Then I've got something here called High Roller. Basically, the High Roller tier is like, look, it's going to be bad, but if you get lucky and you end up as someone of this political class or someone of this nobility or whatever, or even just someone who there's a high proportion of them, it's kind of like 50-50, like you could end up on the good side of this wall, whatever, then actually it's pretty good, right? Underneath it, we got tolerable if lucky. This is a bit the same, but it's like, look, it's bad, but if you're lucky, it won't be horrendous, right? Underneath that, we've got guaranteed bad time. There's just almost no outcome, like unless you just get like that one in multi-million chance of actually being the king, something like that, or someone really important. It's just a bad time. And finally, we've got please God no. The worst of the worst. So
I wonder if anything is actually going to make it to please God no. Yeah. I'm very curious. I
think a lot of things could. Spoiler,
it's not today. The House of Lancaster is definitely not please God no. Well, spoiler, as much as we're not going to say where I think it is yet.
Yeah.
It's definitely not please God no.
We haven't spoken about this, so I'm wondering if you're thinking where I'm thinking. So why don't you tell me we're going to be ranking the House of Lancaster today, the Lancastrian era of England. So Rob, how would you feel about a magical genie showing you up, throwing you back through time, and you having to live out your life in this era?
Okay, so there's a few things to consider. So firstly, you've got the what did you eat at the time? Because obviously that's a big part. We always think about in terms of how likely you are to be signed up for war, or what is your day-to-day life like that. Your day-to-day life is a lot about what do you eat. So interesting, by the way, because obviously we had a lot of there's a lot of like influence between France and England at this point, but apparently food at this point was very regional. So we still had it very, so English food was very different to French food. Similar to the thing, the kind of the staples people ate, but in terms of the dishes, very different. So I think the same way as a lot of kind of a Western Europe peasant's diet.
So what did
is
they eat?
wheat, barley, oats. That's the most common stuff. They would obviously be able to get, if you can get some meat. So apparently pig is the most common that we would have had. And it's also a good source of fat. So obviously animals were a lot leaner back then than they are now. So, and obviously we know that fats are incredibly important in the diet. So apart from that, vegetables, legumes, those sort of things. So those are that's the most common diet. So I think it's like 80% or 70% of your diet would have been like cereals, wheats, that side, barley's, oats. With like ales being a big, obviously ales is a part of where you get, actually it's dietary.
It's funny because you might be, listeners right now might be like, oh, that sounds awful. But you know what? In this time period, a lot of places didn't even have food, all right? So actually, not having like a famine during this time period and things, that sounds pretty good to me. Like, it's, there's not a lot of dietary diversity, but you're alive and you're eating.
And there was actually also some cheeses, milks as well.
Okay, okay.
And early on, it would have been like sheep's milk, but until they moved from more, like, there was some, like, they would have originally had all-rounder sheep, which would have been good for wool, for milk.
And then it's like
but then
specializing.
they more migrated to because like, you have these days, which are cows which are good for leather, cows which are good for meat, cows which are good for milk. There's different species, different breeds, that do different things.
Bred for this reason, yeah.
Exactly. So then they bred them more to produce wool, and they kind of then use milk was less common.
Right.
So that was it. So I think the food, though, in terms of for the period, I don't think is awful.
We did a little,
and obviously you'd have better meals if you were you'd have way more meat if you were a noble, but you still had meat as a peasant. We weren't kind of helped without. So that's firstly, I think that's for me starting not so bad. Obviously your work. Go on.
No, I was gonna say, like, we did a little looking into music beforehand. I got curious,
Yeah, go on.
There were plenty of lutes, harps, even the recorder, the humble recorder. Anyone who went to primary school in the UK will have practiced on the recorder. And people would write songs based on heroic tales. And, Rob, you covered Agincourt, I think a couple episodes ago. They actually wrote a song about it, like an actual song written in the 1400s.
And you're now going to sing it.
Yeah. Go on, lad, sing us a song. That's pretty much how it was back then. So they had entertainment, is what I'm trying to say. They didn't have the best contraception, but yeah, there you go. But let's get to the bleak stuff. Or did you have more positive things to say?
No.
Yeah, I think that has Lancaster era, that kind of 1200 to 1500, just roughly. I forget the exact dates. There was so much war, and war is awful. But it's not just war. Yeah. The Black Death, the plague was in full motion here. We are talking a really crap time. Like, the chances of you just living your life without ever being impacted by one of these things is crazy. Like, there's something I don't think I've talked about in an episode so far, but I don't know if you know this, Rob, but during the Wars of the Roses, right, living as an ordinary person in these towns and these villages, it was tough. It was tough because what would happen is, like, big armies would come through your town, and these regular people would literally keep multiple heraldry that they'd swap out depending on which army was coming through. Because if a Yorkist army was coming through and you had Lancastrian livery or whatever, they would destroy your town and they would take all your food and do whatever else, right? But if they thought, oh yeah, they're on our side, they're supporting us, you would just have to house them, feed them, and deal with all, like, hundreds and hundreds of influx of people basically wrecking your town before they move on, which is far more preferable. And then those very same people could the next week swap everything out and pretend to be supporting the other side just to stay alive, you know? So if I'll put it this way, like, if you got lucky and you rolled during, like, the 100 Years' War era, maybe it wouldn't be too bad considering we were winning, like Henry the Fourth, Henry the Fifth.
And also, 100 Years' War is only going to be if you were recruited to go across, because it's in
If you were
France.
in
It's
France,
not, it wasn't in England.
You would have been safe in England, especially that Henry V era where, one of the things I said in the first episode is that is England was at its most unified. You know, maybe you'd be all right. So I think it sounds like we agree that it's not going in pretty great category. It's not going in the top.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, let's start moving it down already once. So we'll keep moving it down as we decide.
Is it unsurprisingly okay? For me, just the concept of the plague, the Black Death and war, there's
too many problems. Because obviously it's not like we have a long period of time where some of the other periods we'll be looking at are like 300-400 years where you could get lucky with the right time period, or you know, you could high roll it in a certain place to be the right person. But to be honest, if you were the king, you're Henry VI. And that's no good.
Yeah. Even if you were the king. Yeah, all right, bring it down. Take it down. Okay. So is it high roller? So is there a chance that, like, you know, it's like a 50-50, like you could have an awful time or you could have a good time if you were like,
I think the chance is too low.
Agreed.
I think just too low to be high roller.
Agreed. So now the next category is tolerable if lucky. Now,
okay, so we're now between these two, and I think these next two is where it's going to sit.
Yeah,
it's just where we decide of where this is going to be. Is
it a guaranteed bad time, or is it tolerable if you're lucky?
I think there's potentially enough because again, you have to measure. There's a lot of wars going on, but the wars aren't going to be everywhere all at one time. There are also going to be periods where there isn't a war. I think there is a chance that if you would be lucky, and it's not even going to be tolerable. You might have a good life if you actually get lucky, but not necessarily. It's not high roller territory. I don't think it's guaranteed bad time. I don't think it's only a very small proportion that are going to be.
I completely agree with you. So tolerable if lucky, yeah.
And also, everyone just let me know what you think. Where would you put House of Lancaster?
Yeah.
Where would you put, based on everything we've told you, your own knowledge, where are you putting them in terms of the tier list, in terms of, based upon no other information other than what we've told you of what the tiers be?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like this right now is sitting in the middle, there's no middle. There's only, it's the lower middle tier.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fair placement, you know? I think that's a fair, I think there is, you could have an all right time. You could have an all right time.